We've all the latest stories for you now this Friday lunchtime. Here's the ITV News.
The most prolific baby killer in British history. Neonatal nurse Lucy Letby is found guilty of murdering 7 babies in her care and trying to kill 6 more. In the last few minutes, the jury have delivered their conclusions. They've spent more than 100 hours deliberating.
The baby's parents in this case have put their trust in her and others to look after their child, to their baby, and Lucy Letby has abused that trust on an unimaginable level.
Prosecutors described her as a calculated opportunist who used how vulnerable the babies were to camouflage her crimes. We'll be live at Manchester Crown Court. Also on the programme. England prepares for one of the biggest sporting events in history with the World Cup final just 48 hours away. Serena Wiegman says the Lionesses are determined to go all the way.
The resilience the team showed has been really good, and I think it's very special to be in the final, but now we want to win it too.
And BBC presenter Stephen Nolan apologises after allegations he shared an explicit image with staff.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Kylie Pentelow.
Good afternoon. Lucy Letby should have been caring for the ill babies on her ward. But today at Manchester Crown Court, the neonatal nurse was found guilty of murdering 7 of them. She was also convicted of the attempted murders of 6 others. After hearing 9 months of evidence and following her conviction, she becomes Britain's most prolific baby killer. The 33-year-old attacked the infants at the Countess of Chester Hospital over the course of a year between June 2015 and June 2016. She was described by the prosecution as calculated and cold-blooded. The hospital where she worked has yet to comment. Sangeeta Lal has our report.
Hello, Lucy, is it?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Chester, please. Can you step in 2 seconds?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
She was a nurse trusted to care, who chose to kill. Arrested at her suburban home, everything about Lucy Letby seemed normal. But that's exactly what she used to cover the truth, that she's a murderer who attacked her victims as they desperately clung to life, and now the UK's most prolific baby serial killer.
Lucy Letby had a position of trust, and the baby's parents in this case have put their trust in her and others to look after their child, to their baby, and Lucy Letby has abused that trust on an unimaginable level.
This is where Letby began her murderous campaign in June 2015. Over a year, she attacked babies, some by injecting air into their bloodstreams or stomachs, which killed 7 newborns. She attacked her other victims by dislodging their breathing tubes or poisoning them with insulin, something she used on a baby known in court as Baby L, whose twin brother, known as Baby M, was also attacked. She injected him with air, which caused his heart to stop, something his parents say they'll never forget.
When I went down, I saw doctors around the trolley and they're just pumping his heart like a rag doll, really. He was just like a doll, and they were just going like that, to the chest. They were prescribing medication, and they were ready to give up after 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden, Baby M just came back to life out of nowhere. And by the grace of God, he's okay today.
What has Lucy Letby taken from your family?
She took everything. Our joy, happiness.
I'm not the same person I was before.
As a neonatal nurse, Letby operated in plain sight, but it didn't go unnoticed. 4 consultants at the unit raised their concerns to hospital bosses when they realised every time a baby inexplicably died, there was an explanation, that Letby was always on shift.
It's regrettable that we had to wait for that accumulation of deaths to realise something bad was happening. But although some concerns were raised early on, from my personal point of view, I felt that perhaps Lucy Letby had just been unlucky in being the nurse looking after some of the babies who died. That concern and feeling sorry for her changed when the pattern of deaths continued and she continued to be associated with them.
But more than a year later, by July 2016, hospital bosses finally involved the police, and after a 2-year investigation, Letby was arrested in 2018. When officers searched her home, they found a post-it note where she wrote, "I'm evil, I did this," and a diary where she marked the date of her attacks with the initials of her victims. But Letby never admitted her guilt.
They told me that there had been a lot more deaths and that I'd been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
And that was what she professed throughout the 9-month trial, where she calmly sat in the dock, but at times broke down when describing how this has affected her life, telling, the prosecution said, that she never cried for her victims, whose parents should have believed their babies were in the safest place, in the hands of a nurse whose job was to protect them from harm. But she betrayed those who dangerously depended on her, babies who had no chance to fight back.
Well, Sangeeta's at Manchester Crown Court for us this lunchtime. Sangeeta, describe what happened there today.
Well, these verdicts have been read out to families over the past few weeks, and some parents finding out before others that Lucy Letby had murdered their babies. Of course, an incredibly difficult verdict to hear, and many families broke down in tears today, many of them consoling each other and supporting each other throughout this 10-month trial. But what's been particularly difficult about today is that Lucy Letby herself wasn't here to hear many of the verdicts. Now, the verdicts have been read over a few weeks. We've not been able to report them until today, and Lucy Letby was here at the beginning of some of the first verdicts, and she did break down herself in the dock when the first guilty verdicts were read out. Now, her parents, who have actually been here every single day until today, have not been present in court either. They also broke down at the beginning of verdicts being read out, but weren't present today. And just a reminder of what those verdicts are. Lucy Letby has been found guilty of murdering 7 babies, of attempting to murder 6 others, but the jury were unable to reach a verdict on 3 other babies.
Sangeeta, this has been a complex trial and a complex investigation.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, this trial has lasted 10 months, and throughout this trial that's involved mostly circumstantial evidence. That means that there has been very little forensic evidence directly linking Lucy Letby to these deaths, and what that's meant for the jury is they've had to understand complicated medical terms so that they can understand just how vulnerable these babies were, some born less than a pound in weight. They've had to understand what these babies could have been vulnerable to understand what could have caused their deaths. And we're expecting statements to be read out on behalf of the families soon and from the police. We haven't heard from the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit yet. And now the families have to wait until Monday for Lucy Letby to be sentenced. But for many families, they still don't have any answers for what's happened to their children.
Sangeeta Lal at Manchester Crown Court for now, thank you. Well, I'm joined by our UK editor, Paul Brand. Paul, incredibly difficult day for those families in what's been a hugely significant case. Your reflections this lunchtime?
Well, Kylie, it is chilling enough that Lucy Letby has become Britain's worst ever baby killer. But what's even more chilling now for those families is the question of whether or not their babies could have been saved if Lucy Letby could have been caught earlier. And we've spoken to multiple witnesses in this case, particularly the doctors who worked alongside Lucy Letby, and they have alleged that they spent 2 years raising suspicions with hospital management, telling them that they believed Lucy Letby was doing something suspicious to these babies, and yet they were told time and time again that they would not be investigated, that those accusations would not be investigated until police were eventually brought in. So those doctors, understandably today, are feeling pretty vindicated. In response to that, we haven't, as Sangeeta said, had any statement yet from the Trust, but we have heard from some of the individuals who were in the management at that time. For example, the former medical director, Ian Harvey, who says, "I was determined to keep the baby unit safe and support our staff. I wanted the reviews and investigations carried out." He now wants an inquiry into all of this. So does the former chief executive, Tony Chambers, and so do the doctors, quite frankly. I think quite possibly there will be one.
Paul, thank you very much. We'll have continuing coverage of this breaking story on ITVX and on our website, itv.com/news. Let's move on to the World Cup, and Serena